The emergency beacon screamed through the void of space, a desperate cry that no one wanted to hear. In the Grand Council chamber, Ambassador Helen Price stood quietly among creatures from 100 different worlds. The holographic display showed a small planet called Theta 7, and the red warning symbols that blinked across its surface told a terrible story. "They are dying," said Elder Thren, his voice breaking. The tall Valasian's skin flickered with pale blue light, dimming and brightening as fear overwhelmed him. 200,000 of my people. The swarm came 3 days ago. Our defenses lasted only hours. We have perhaps 2 more days before. He could not finish the sentence. Around the chamber, the other species murmured among themselves. Helen watched them carefully, reading their body language even when she could not understand their words. She had been humanity's representative for 5 years now, and she had learned one important truth: the galaxy was old, tired, and careful. No one wanted to take risks anymore. "This is unfortunate," said Commander Vorith of the KRYNN Empire. The massive reptilian creature leaned back in his seat, his scales catching the light. "But Theta 7 is not strategically important. It produces only food. We cannot justify military action for a farming colony." "Those are not crops dying down there," Helen said sharply. "Those are people." "Valasians," corrected Trade Minister Zeth of the Gentari Collective. The insect-like being clicked its mandibles together. "Not our people. The Council has always maintained that each species must defend its own territories. The Valasians chose not to build strong military forces. This is the consequence of that choice." Elder Thren's hands shook. "We are scientists, artists, teachers. We never thought, we never believed that someone would attack you," Helen finished quietly. She looked around the chamber at all the powerful species, all the advanced civilizations, all the mighty empires that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. "And you called for help. You sent out that beacon believing someone would come." "Yes," Thren whispered. "Was that foolish?" Helen took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. "No. It was not foolish. And someone will come." The chamber fell silent. "What are you saying, Ambassador?" asked Vorith slowly. "I am saying that Earth will respond to the distress call. We will send military forces to Theta 7. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vorith began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that made the floor vibrate. "Humanity? The youngest species in the Council? The primitives who only learned faster than light travel 60 years ago? You will face the swarm?" He laughed harder. "You will all die, Ambassador. The swarm does not negotiate. They consume everything. They have destroyed civilizations that were old when your ancestors were still living in caves." "Maybe," Helen said calmly. "But we will try." Elder Thren stared at her with wide, luminous eyes. "Ambassador Price, I do not understand. Earth and Valasia have no treaty. No trade agreements. We have never even met face to face before today. Why would your people do this?" Helen met his gaze. "Because you asked for help. Because children are going to die if no one comes. Because it is the right thing to do." She paused. "Is that not reason enough?" Thren's skin flared bright blue, so bright that several representatives shielded their eyes. It was the Valasian expression of overwhelming emotion. I do not know what to say." "Say nothing," Helen replied gently. "Just tell your people to hold on. Tell them help is coming." 2 hours later, Helen stood in the communication room, looking at Admiral Robert Blake's face on the screen. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and tired blue eyes, but his jaw was set with determination. "You know the odds," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." The swarm destroyed 30 Valasian defense platforms. 30. And those platforms had weapons technology we do not even understand yet. What makes you think 4 human ships can make any difference? Because we have to try, Robert. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned away. "Get me Captains Miller, Harris, and Stone. Full Marine deployment. We leave in 90 minutes. How many can you send?" 3 destroyers and the carrier Defiance. 5,000 Marines. That is every ship I can scramble in time to make a difference. Helen felt her throat tighten. 5,000. Against an enemy that had overwhelmed an entire planetary defense system. It will have to be enough. "Helen," Robert said quietly. "When the Council sees the casualties, they will say we were fools. They will say we wasted human lives on strangers who mean nothing to us. Let them say it. And if we all die? Then we die doing what humans do best. Helen smiled sadly. We die protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That is who we are, Robert. That is who we have always been. Robert nodded slowly. 90 minutes. We will get there, Helen. I do not know if we can win, but I swear to you, we will get there. The screen went dark. Helen stood alone in the quiet room. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the letter she had written that morning explaining why she had to do this. She thought about the Valasian children on Theta 7, frightened and alone, wondering why the stars were silent. We are coming, she whispered. Hold on. Humanity is coming. In orbit beyond Mars, 4 ships gathered. 4 ships against an ancient enemy. 5,000 men and women who had volunteered knowing they might never come home. Captain James Miller checked his weapons one last time. Lieutenant Beth Morris kissed her daughter's photograph. Across all 4 ships, soldiers prepared for battle. Admiral Blake's voice echoed through every corridor. All hands, prepare for jump. There are 200,000 people who need us. Let us show them what humanity means. Let us show the galaxy that when someone calls for help, we answer. Space twisted. Stars stretched into rivers of light. And 4 human ships vanished into the darkness, racing toward a world none of them had ever seen, to save people they had never met, because it was the right thing to do. Behind them, Elder Thren fell to his knees and prayed to gods he no longer believed in, praying that maybe this time, the universe would show mercy. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately every alarm on every ship began screaming at once. Captain James Miller gripped the railing of the Thunderchills bridge and stared at the scene before him. His mouth went dry. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Beth Morris beside him. Theta 7 hung in space like a jewel wrapped in darkness. But the darkness was alive. Massive organic shapes surrounded the planet, ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built. They pulsed with sickly green light, their surfaces writhing with movement. Some were small, no larger than human fighters. Others were the size of cities, their bodies covered in what looked like armor made of bone and chitin. Scan complete, said the tactical officer, his voice shaking. I count 240 swarm vessels. The Valasian orbital platforms are gone. All 30 of them. There is debris everywhere. Life signs on the planet? James asked. Reading approximately 180,000 Valasians concentrated in the capital city. Down from 200,000 when the distress call was sent. The officer paused. Sir, we are also reading 50,000 swarm organisms on the surface. They are moving toward the city. Admiral Blake's voice came through on the fleet channel. All ships, battle stations. Miller, Harris, Stone, form defensive formation Delta 7. We need to break through to the planet's surface. The Marines cannot deploy until we secure a landing zone. James watched the swarm ships. They had noticed the human fleet now. Dozens of the smaller vessels were turning, moving with an awful grace that made his skin crawl. They move like animals, Beth said quietly. Like sharks circling prey. Then let us show them that humans bite back, James replied. Weapons, target the nearest cluster. Fire when ready. The Thunderchills railgun spoke, sending streams of metal slugs into the swarm formation. The projectiles tore through the first vessel, punching holes through its organic armor. Green fluid sprayed into space, freezing instantly. For a moment, James felt a surge of hope. Then he watched in horror as the holes in the swarm ship began to close. The damaged tissue writhed and regenerated, healing before his eyes. They are repairing themselves, Beth said, her voice tight. Conventional weapons are barely slowing them down. Then we hit them harder, James snapped. Missiles, full spread. Target their propulsion sections. If they can heal, let us see how fast they can do it. Across the human fleet, missiles streaked toward the swarm. Explosions blossomed in the darkness, tearing apart the organic vessels. This time the damage was too severe for immediate repair. 3 swarm ships spun out of control, their bodies torn open. But there were 237 more. The swarm returned fire. Projectiles that looked like living things shot across space, trailing acid that burned through metal. One struck the destroyer Vengeance, eating through her forward armor. Alarms wailed as compartments explosively decompressed. Vengeance is reporting casualties, the communication officer said. Hull breach on decks 2 and 3. They are sealing the sections now. Admiral Blake's voice cut through the chaos. All ships, concentrate fire on the largest vessel. If we can take down their command ship, it might disrupt their coordination. Defiance will make the run to the planet's surface while you cover her. James understood immediately. The Admiral was going to land the Marines while the destroyers held off the swarm fleet. It was insane. It was also their only chance. Understood, Admiral. Thunderchild moving to engage. The three destroyers accelerated, their weapons blazing. They focused every gun, every missile, every ounce of firepower on the massive swarm vessel at the center of the formation. It was easily 3 times the size of the carrier Defiance, a nightmare of organic technology that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. The swarm responded with fury. Dozens of their ships swarmed the destroyers, firing continuously. The Vengeance took another hit, this one striking her engine core. The explosion tore the ship in half. 800 lives ended in an instant of fire and vacuum. Vengeance is gone, the tactical officer reported, his voice barely controlled. No survivors. James felt rage and grief war inside him, but he pushed both aside. There would be time to mourn later. If there was a later. Keep firing. Do not let up. Below them, the carrier Defiance streaked toward the planet, her hull glowing from atmospheric entry. Inside, Captain and Carter stood in the deployment bay, watching 5,000 Marines check their weapons and armor one last time. These men and women knew what they were facing. They had all volunteered anyway. Listen up, and shouted over the roar of the engines. Intel says there are 50,000 swarm organisms between us and the civilian population. They have had 3 days to dig in. The Valasians are scared, they are tired, and they are waiting for us to save them. She paused. So that is exactly what we are going to do. We are humanity's answer to their distress call. Let us make it a good one. A roar of approval rose from the Marines. The Defiance touched down hard, her landing struts crumpling under the impact. The deployment ramps dropped and Marines poured out, their boots hitting alien soil for the first time. The landing zone was on the outskirts of New Valanis, the Valasian capital. In the distance, and could see the city's tall, graceful towers. She could also see the swarm. They came from everywhere at once, a tide of chittering, screaming horror. The creatures were the size of large dogs, with too many legs and mandibles that dripped acid. They moved with terrible speed, leaping and scrambling over each other in their frenzy to reach the humans. Open fire! And screamed. The Marines formed a defensive line, their weapons blazing. The thunder of gunfire echoed across the landscape. Swarm creatures fell by the dozens, but more kept coming. Always more. Grenade, someone shouted. Explosions ripped through the swarm ranks, sending bodies flying. But the gaps filled immediately. A young Marine, barely 20 years old, was pulled down by 3 creatures. His screams cut off abruptly. 2 of his squadmates charged forward, dragging his body back even as they fired with one hand. No one gets left behind, their sergeant roared. Hold the line. The Valasians watched from the city walls, unable to believe what they were seeing. These strange aliens from Earth were fighting and dying for them. Fighting not because they had to, but because they had chosen to. Because someone had asked for help and they had answered. Above the planet, the battle continued. The destroyers hammered the swarm command ship relentlessly. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the massive vessel began to break apart. Pieces of organic matter spun away into space, trailing fluids. Target destroyed, the tactical officer reported. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining swarm ships did not break off. They did not retreat. They pressed their attack harder, as if enraged by the loss. Admiral Blake watched from the Defiance's bridge as his destroyers fought desperately. He had sent them to die buying time for the Marines. He knew it. They knew it. And they did it anyway. Sir, his executive officer said quietly. We have successfully deployed all ground forces. Should we return to orbit? Captain and Carter crouched behind a makeshift barricade of cargo containers and broken vehicles, her rifle burning hot in her hands. Around her, Marines fired in controlled bursts at the waves of swarm creatures that kept coming from the wasteland beyond the city. The air stank of blood and acid and burning metal. Ammunition check, she shouted over the gunfire. The responses came back grim. 20%. 15%. 10%. They were running out of everything. Food. Water. Medical supplies. But mostly bullets. A young Marine named Thomas Webb collapsed beside her, his face gray with exhaustion. He had not slept in 48 hours. None of them had. Every time they tried to rest, another wave of swarm attacked. Captain, Thomas said, his voice hoarse. How much longer can we do this? And looked at him. He was 19 years old. He should have been in college somewhere on Earth, chasing girls and worrying about exams. Instead he was here, fighting monsters on an alien world, dying by inches for people he had never met. As long as we have to, she said simply. Behind them, the city of New Valanis rose into the sky. The Valasians had built their capital to be beautiful, all flowing lines and crystalline towers that caught the light. Now those towers were filled with refugees, frightened civilians who pressed against the windows to watch the humans fight. Elder Thren appeared at Anne's position, moving carefully through the defensive lines. The tall Valasian looked older than he had days ago, his bioluminescent skin dim with stress and lack of sleep. "Captain Carter," he said softly. "I have just received word from our medical facilities. We are treating your wounded, but many are beyond our ability to help. Your doctor, the one called Harris, he says you have lost over 800 soldiers. 800 dead." And felt the number like a physical blow. They had landed with 5,000. Now less than 4,000 remained combat effective. "We knew the cost when we came," she said. "But why?" Thren's voice broke. "Why do you continue to pay it? You could withdraw to your ships. Escape to orbit. Save yourselves." And looked at him for a long moment. Then she pointed to a section of the wall where several Valasian children watched from a window, their large eyes reflecting the light of explosions. "That is why," she said. "Because if we leave, they die. All of them." Thren followed her gaze. One of the children, a small girl no more than 5 years old, pressed her hand against the glass. A Marine below saw her and waved. The girl waved back, a tiny smile on her face. "I do not understand your species," Thren whispered. "The galaxy says humans are violent, aggressive, dangerous. But you are here dying for us and asking nothing in return." "Maybe that is what makes us dangerous," Anne replied. "We care too much. We fight for things that do not make logical sense." She turned back to the battlefield. "And we are too stubborn to know when to quit." In orbit above, the destroyer Thunderchild drifted, her hull torn open in a dozen places. Captain James Miller sat in his command chair, listening to damage reports flood in. They had lost the Vengeance on the first day. The destroyer Triumph had gone down 2 days ago, ramming a swarm cruiser in a desperate attempt to break their orbital blockade. Now only Thunderchild remained, and she was dying. "Sir," Lieutenant Beth Morris said quietly. "We have maybe 6 hours of life support remaining. After that, the environmental systems will fail completely." James looked at the tactical display. Swarm ships still surrounded the planet. Not as many as before, but enough. Enough to kill them all. "How many people on board?" he asked. 312. Down from 800. 312 souls. James closed his eyes. He could order an evacuation. Send everyone down to the planet in shuttles. It would buy them a few more days of life. But it would also mean abandoning the one ship that could provide orbital fire support to the Marines. "Beth," he said slowly. "If we stay up here, how long can we keep fighting?" She understood immediately what he was asking. "The weapons still have power. We could fight for another 2 or 3 days before the ship breaks apart completely. Then we stay. Use the shuttles to evacuate non-essential personnel. Everyone else remains at their posts." "Sir, that is a death sentence." "Yes," James agreed. "It is. But those Marines down there need covering fire. And I will be damned if I abandon them now." He looked at his crew, these men and women who had followed him into hell. "Anyone who wants to evacuate has my permission. No questions asked. No judgment. You have all done more than duty requires." Not a single person moved. Beth smiled tiredly. "I guess we are all too stubborn to quit, sir." On the ground, the swarm launched another assault. This time they came with something new. Massive creatures, 15 feet tall and covered in thick armor plates, charged the human lines. Bullets bounced off their hides. Grenades barely slowed them down. "Fall back!" and screamed. "Everyone fall back to secondary positions." The Marines retreated in good order, firing as they went. But the giant creatures kept coming, smashing through barricades like they were made of paper. One grabbed a Marine and tore him in half. Another crushed a weapons position under its massive feet. Then something unexpected happened. A beam of blue light struck one of the creatures, burning a hole through its armor. Then another beam, and another. And spun around to see Valasians on the city walls, firing makeshift weapons cobbled together from mining equipment and construction tools. Elder Thren stood among them, holding a converted plasma cutter. His skin blazed bright with determination. "You fight for us," he shouted down to Anne. "So we fight beside you. We will not hide while you die protecting us. More Valasians poured from the city gates. Teachers carrying improvised spears. Engineers with welding torches turned into flamethrowers. Scientists who had spent their lives studying art and music, now picking up weapons for the first time. They were clumsy, untrained, terrified. But they fought. A Valasian elder fell, dragged down by swarm creatures. 3 humans charged forward to save him, blasting the creatures at point-blank range. A human marine was wounded, and 2 Valasian civilians pulled her to safety, carrying her back to the medical stations. And felt tears sting her eyes. This was what they had come for. Not just to save the Valasians, but to show them they could save themselves. All units, she shouted into her radio. Hold the line. Hold it together. Human and Valasian, side by side. Let us show the swarm what it means to face people who refuse to give up. The combined forces rallied. Humans provided covering fire while Valasians flanked the giant creatures, striking at weak points in their armor. Valasians used their knowledge of the local terrain to set traps while humans lured the swarm into kill zones. The battle raged through the night. When dawn broke over New Valanis on the 7th day, the swarm pulled back. Not retreating, but regrouping. Preparing for another assault. And stood among the exhausted defenders, human and Valasian alike. They had held. Barely. But they had held. Captain, Thomas Webb said, appearing beside her. His uniform was torn and bloody, but he was alive. Scouts report swarm activity in the cave systems to the north. Big concentrations. The cave entrance yawned before them like the mouth of some ancient beast. Captain and Carter stood at the edge, staring into the darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Behind her, 100 Marines checked their weapons one final time. It was all they could spare. The rest had to stay and defend the city. Last chance to back out, and said, not turning around. No one moved. No one spoke. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing what it meant. The hive was deep underground, protected by thousands of swarm creatures. The chances of reaching it were slim. The chances of making it back out were almost zero. Sergeant David Stone stepped forward. He was 40 years old, a veteran of Earth's colonial conflicts, with scars on his face and gray in his hair. Captain, permission to speak freely? Granted. We all joined the military for different reasons. Some of us wanted adventure. Some wanted to serve. Some just needed a job. He paused, looking at the other Marines. But today, we know exactly why we are here. Those people in the city, human and Valasian both, they are counting on us. So let us stop talking and start moving. And nodded slowly. You heard the sergeant. We go in fast, we go in quiet, and we do not stop until we reach that hive brain. Every moment we waste is another moment the swarm has to kill our people up top. They descended into the caves. The walls were not stone. They were organic, pulsing with a sickly bioluminescence that cast everything in shades of green and yellow. The air was thick and wet, making it hard to breathe. Worse was the smell, a rotting stench that made several Marines gag. Stay tight, and whispered into her radio. Watch every shadow. They know we are here. They moved through tunnels that twisted and branched like blood vessels. The deeper they went, the more the caves looked less like natural formations and more like they had been grown deliberately. Chambers opened up around them, walls covered in what looked like egg sacs and breeding pods. This is where they are made, Thomas Webb said, his voice shaking. This is how the swarm reproduces. A shriek echoed through the tunnels, high-pitched and furious. Then another. And another. Contact, someone screamed. Swarm creatures poured from side passages, their claws scraping on the organic walls. The Marines opened fire in the confined space, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness. The noise was deafening, bullets ricocheting off stone and chitin. And fired her rifle until it clicked empty, then drew her sidearm and kept shooting. Beside her, David Stone used his knife when a creature got too close, driving the blade into what he hoped was its brain. It shrieked and died, but 2 more took its place. Grenades! And shouted. Bring down the tunnel behind us. 2 Marines threw their last grenades into the passage they had just come through. The explosion collapsed the tunnel, sealing them in but cutting off the swarm reinforcements coming from behind. Keep moving forward. It is the only way out now. They fought through chamber after chamber. The swarm seemed endless. For every creature they killed, more appeared. The Marines left a trail of bodies behind them, human and swarm alike. David Stone took a claw across his chest, armor and flesh torn open. Thomas Webb pulled him back, wrapping a field dressing around the wound even as they kept running. A Marine named Patricia Green was dragged into a side passage, screaming. 3 others charged after her, firing blindly into the darkness. Only 2 came back. Patricia was gone. And kept counting in her head. Started with 100. Now 83. Now 76. Now 62. They were dying. But they were getting closer. Above them, on the surface, Admiral Robert Blake stood on the walls of New Villanis, watching the horizon through binoculars. The swarm had noticed the humans' absence. They were massing for another assault, larger than any before. "How long can we hold?" asked Elder Thren beside him. "Depends on how fast and can move," Robert replied. "If she reaches the hive in the next hour, we might have a chance. If not." He did not finish the sentence. "Admiral, our people are ready to fight. We will not let the humans stand alone." Robert looked at the Valasians lining the walls, holding their improvised weapons with shaking hands. A week ago, these people had been artists and teachers. Now they were soldiers, ready to die defending their home. "Your people have already done more than I had any right to ask," Robert said quietly. "You asked nothing," Thren replied. "You simply came when we called. That is a debt we can never repay, but we will die trying." The swarm attacked. They came in a wave that seemed to stretch to the horizon, thousands of creatures running, leaping, scrambling over each other in their hunger to reach the city. The defenders opened fire, every weapon they had blazing at once. Down in the hive, and her team reached a massive chamber. The walls here were different, covered in neural tissue that pulsed with rhythm like a giant heartbeat. And in the center, hanging from strands of organic cable, was the hive brain. It was huge, easily 30 feet across, a mass of gray matter protected by layers of bone armor. Tendrils extended from it in all directions, connecting to every part of the hive network. And it knew they were there. The brain pulsed, and felt something press against her mind. Not words exactly, but concepts. Images. Feelings. The swarm showing her what would happen if she succeeded. Her people on the surface would be slaughtered. The Valasians exterminated. Everything they had fought for would be lost. But if she failed, if she turned back now, the swarm would let the humans leave. Let them escape. They would even spare some of the Valasians. Not all, but some. A mercy, in exchange for her surrender. "Captain," David Stone said, reading her face. "Whatever that thing is saying, do not listen." And looked at her remaining Marines. 43 left from the 100 who had entered. 43 exhausted, bleeding, terrified soldiers who had followed her into hell itself. "Plant the charges," she said firmly. "All of them. I want this thing blown back to whatever nightmare it crawled from." The Marines moved quickly, placing nuclear charges around the chamber. The hive brain screamed, not with sound but with psychic force that made their ears bleed and their vision blur. More swarm creatures poured into the chamber, desperate to stop them. "Hold them off," and shouted. "Just 30 more seconds." The Marines formed a circle around the demo team, firing at everything that moved. Thomas Webb took a hit to the shoulder but kept shooting. David Stone's rifle ran dry, so he picked up a swarm claw from a dead creature and used it as a weapon, screaming defiance. "Charges set," called the demo specialist. "We have 2 minutes to get clear. Everyone move. Back the way we came." They ran through tunnels collapsing behind them, swarm creatures snapping at their heels. Marines fell, buying seconds with their lives for their comrades to escape. The countdown in N's head marked each second like a funeral bell. 60 seconds. 45. 30. They burst from a side exit, tumbling into daylight just as the ground beneath them shook. A massive explosion erupted from the cave system, fire and debris shooting into the sky. The shockwave knocked everyone flat. When N pushed herself up, her ears ringing, she saw the swarm creatures on the battlefield suddenly stop moving. Admiral Robert Blake stood on the walls of New Villanis, watching the massive warships descend from orbit. Hundreds of vessels from 24 species, gleaming and powerful and utterly useless. They had come 3 days too late. Beside him, Elder Thren watched the fleet with an expression Robert could not quite read. The tall Valasian's skin flickered with colors Robert had learned meant complex emotions. "They come now," Thren said quietly. "Now that the fighting is done. Now that the dying is finished." Robert said nothing. What could he say? The Council had abandoned them. Humanity had fought alone, bled alone, died alone. And now the galaxy wanted to pretend they had cared all along. A shuttle landed in the central plaza. Commander Vorath emerged first, his reptilian bulk impressive in ornate armor that had never seen battle. Behind him came representatives from the Gentari Collective, the Foreign Unity, the Castellan League. All the great powers of the galaxy, arriving to survey the aftermath. Admiral Blake, Vorith said, his voice booming. We came as quickly as we could. The Council mobilized our full military response. 3 days too late, Robert replied flatly. Vorith's scaled face twisted. There were protocols. Procedures. You cannot expect the Council to react instantly to every crisis. We did not expect anything, Robert said. That is why we came ourselves. Elder Thren stepped forward, and suddenly his skin blazed with brilliant light, so bright that several aliens shielded their eyes. It was anger, Robert realized. Pure, burning anger from a species that rarely showed such emotion. You abandoned us, Thren said, his voice shaking. We called for help and you debated. You discussed. You held meetings while my people died. And then these humans came. These young, foolish, brave humans who had no obligation to us, no treaty, no reason except that it was right. His voice rose. Where were you when the swarm tore through our defenses? Where were you when human soldiers died by the hundreds to protect my children? Vorith had no answer. Captain Nkata walked through the city streets, her leg in a brace from injuries sustained in the hive. Around her, Valasians and humans worked together to repair the damage. A Valasian engineer showed a human sergeant how to fix a power generator. Human medics treated Valasian wounded. Children from both species played together in the ruins, their laughter a strange sound after so much death. A small Valasian girl, no more than 6 years old, ran up to Anne and thrust a flower into her hand. It was native to Theta 7, with petals that glowed softly in the fading light. For you, the girl said in halting English. Because you saved us. And knelt down, ignoring the pain in her leg. What is your name? Lyra. Well, Lyra, I want you to know something. We did not save you. We helped you. But you and your people, you saved yourselves too. You fought beside us. You stood when you could have run. That takes courage. The girl's skin flickered with shy pride. Then she hugged Anne and ran off, back to her mother who watched from a doorway with tears streaming down her face. Thomas Webb appeared beside Anne, helping her stand. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, but he was alive. So many were not. The count is final, he said quietly. We lost 3,218. From the 5,000 who landed. And closed her eyes. More than half. More than half of the men and women who had answered the call were dead. And the ships. Vengeance destroyed. Triumph destroyed. Thunderchild will never fly again, but Captain Miller and 78 of his crew survived. The Defiance is salvageable. Numbers. Statistics. But each number was a person. Someone's son or daughter. Someone's parent or spouse. 3,218 families who would never see their loved ones again. Was it worth it, Thomas? And asked, the same question he had asked her. Thomas looked around at the city. At the Valasians alive and rebuilding. At the human and Valasian flags flying side by side over the command post. Yes, Captain. It was worth it. In the Grand Plaza, Elder Thren called an assembly. Thousands gathered, Valasian and human alike, with the council representatives standing uncomfortably to one side. A camera drone broadcast the speech across the galaxy, to every member world of the council. Thren stood at a podium, his skin steady now, glowing with calm determination. 3 weeks ago, we sent a distress call into the darkness, he began. We asked for help. We believed that the great civilizations of the galaxy, species who had mastered space and time, who had built empires lasting millennia, would answer. We were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Only one species answered. Humanity. The youngest member of the council. The species that many of you call primitive. Aggressive. Dangerous. Thren's voice grew stronger. And yes, they are dangerous. Because they possess something the rest of the galaxy has forgotten. They possess honor. Courage. The willingness to sacrifice themselves for strangers. He gestured to where Nkata stood with her marines, many on crutches, all bearing wounds. These humans came when no one else would. They bled for us. They died for us. 3,218 human soldiers gave their lives defending people they had never met. Captain Nkata led 100 Marines into the heart of the swarm hive, knowing it was likely suicide, because it was the only way to save us. Only 23 came out alive. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. The council says there are protocols. Procedures. That intervention requires careful consideration. I say this to the Council, while you were considering, these humans were dying. While you debated, they fought. While you protected your interests, they protected our children. Thren turned to face Vorith and the other Council representatives directly. Humanity answered the call. They will forever be remembered as the species who taught the galaxy what courage truly means. Who showed us that honor is not about treaties or trade agreements. It is about doing what is right, even when it costs everything. The Valasians began to chant, a rising chorus that was picked up by the humans. They answered. They answered. They answered. Ambassador Helen Price stood among the crowd, tears running down her face. She had believed in humanity's choice. She had supported it. But she had not known if it would matter. Now she knew. It mattered more than she could have imagined. Days later, Robert Blake prepared to return to Earth with the survivors. The Defiance was being repaired enough for the journey home. As he walked to the shuttle, Valasian civilians lined the streets, bowing as he passed. It made him uncomfortable. He was no hero. He had simply done what needed to be done. Elder Thren met him at the shuttle ramp. "Admiral, I have no words sufficient to thank you." "Then say nothing," Robert replied. "Just remember what we fought for. Peace. Cooperation. The belief that when someone calls for help, someone should answer." "We will remember," Thren promised. "And Admiral, I want you to know something. The Council is changing. Your actions have shamed them. Several species have approached us, asking to establish defense pacts, offering aid, promising to respond faster to future crises. You have done more than save one world.